We would like to welcome you to the first podcast in our series. To launch the series, we are going to have a small chat with our director, Alfred Zammit, and the topic for today is nonetheless then AMLA, something which is already on people's minds, especially our subject persons and all the stakeholders in the field. And we're going to try and give you a little bit of more clarity and information about what AMLA is. Alfred, you're involved in AMLA directly. So far, what can you tell us about AMLA? What does it stand for? What is its scope?
Thanks, Catherine. So AMLA, first of all, just to get around the name, right? So it stands for Anti-Money Laundering Authority. So it's quite a straightforward acronym. And it is an agency, a European agency that was recently set up. Its seat is in Frankfurt in Germany, and it has a number of different objectives. But to really simplify, what AMLA is there for, it is there to promote a stronger AML, anti-money laundering framework across the European Union.
Okay. This stems from the realization, I suppose, that sometimes what works in one country isn't reflected in another.
Correct. So one of the reasons why AMLA was set up, and we shouldn't look at AMLA just in isolation as AMLA. It is very important for everyone to recall that AMLA is part of what we often refer to as a European package that intends to strengthen the European Union's ability to fight money laundering and terrorism financing, both through the preventative side, which is like by issuing regulatory standards and guidelines as well as on the more disruptive side. This is where financial intelligence units come in to fight money laundering and terrorism financing through their function as FIAUs all over the EU. So and AMLA is an authority. And it forms part of a wider package that includes also a set of regulations that are directly applicable across the European Union. And the regulations obviously make a big difference in the sense that before, up to now, and actually still currently in force, we, when I say we, Malta and all European Union member states, are operating under a regime where we have EU directives that have been transposed nationally into our law. And the same applies also in other countries. They too have transposed the European Union directives to combat money laundering and terrorism financing. And when you are transposing directives, you end up with differences across the laws in countries when it comes to AML. But with a regulation, then you have more harmonization. Okay. So there is much less of a need to transpose, to therefore understand what the directive asks you to do and then write it in your own national laws. There is much less of a need for that to happen, and instead we are going to be applying directly rules that are set at EU level and therefore are applicable directly without the need for any transposition across the whole of the EU.
Okay. So by way to maybe give an example and clarify, we could maybe use the use of cash restriction regulations because not all countries have them within the EU, and the limit is not the same across all countries. So through AMLA, there is the vision and the direction that it would be standardized across all EU countries. Is this one idea or one example?
Yes, it's more through the package. So as AMLA is part of the package, so to speak. And when we look at the package and when we look at the regulations and the directive as well, because there is still an element which is covered by a directive.
Okay.
That is one case in point where up to now there was no legal requirement on EU member states to impose a cash limitation policy. In actual fact, most EU countries already had a cash limitation policy. Some did not, and even when you look at those countries that currently have a cash limitation policy, you will see differences in the maximum allowable transactions that may be carried out in hard cash. So this is, yes, just one area that the package is setting a greater harmonization. However, when we look at the regulation and therefore the actual anti-money laundering obligations that currently in Malta subject persons are implementing, currently they are coming out of national law as a result of transpositions that took place in past years. However, these will now be applied harmoniously across the board through a set of EU regulations.
So, and that brings me to the question, what does this all mean? Starting with the FIAU, how is that, so far from what we know, impacting the FIAU?
It will impact the FIU, and it will also impact subject persons.
Okay.
And I might refer to them also as obliged entities, because now this is a term that we need to start getting used to, because the package refers to what we refer to as subject persons, it refers to them as obliged entities. So I might use these interchangeably, but it is a term that we all need to get used to. So it will impact both the FIU and also subject persons, and it will also impact other entities that so far have not been subject persons, and they will become subject persons under the new package. So there are multiple things that we need to get to work on, and obviously a lot of work is already happening behind the scenes. When it comes to the FIU itself, we have to look at our different functions. On the regulatory side, it will impact pretty much everything to a certain degree, in the sense that just like we are very familiar with our current national laws, because we ourselves have been involved in the drafting and in the transpositions in the past. Now we will have to adapt to a new set of regulation, both for us and obliged entities in Malta. We remain supervisors, so we will need to obviously understand how to supervise obliged entities against these new regulations. So obviously we just like obliged entities need to make sure that we truly understand the obligations coming out of the new set of EU rules when it comes to anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing. It will impact the way we also then carry out our supervisory duties. So one of the big changes when it comes to this package and AMLA is that there is a very strong drive to increase consistency in the way supervision is carried out. So far there are principles that are applied across the board, such as the concept of risk-based approach to carrying out supervision. But now with the package, there will be increased consistency, and I can give some concrete examples. For example, there's going to be a harmonized way how authorities like us are risk assessing obliged entities in their countries, with a common set of questionnaires that we will be using across the EU to collect information from obliged entities. So far we have ours and other countries have theirs. So far every country has done its own thing when it comes to what information is it collecting to risk assess every individual subject person. And going forward, in a few years' time, we will be using this questionnaire that is set by AMLA.
Okay.
We will be also using a methodology set by AMLA to risk assess every subject person. There will be clear expectations on how frequent and the level of depth of supervision that needs to be carried out depending on risk.
Okay.
So this is just one example of how things will change for us even as supervisors. Even when we identify then weaknesses, when we carry out an inspection and we identify weaknesses at a subject person that, for example, a subject person might not be properly implementing their AML obligations, this is where then we'd need to consider taking administrative action to drive that subject person to compliance. And even there is going to be increased harmonization. In fact, incidentally, a consultation paper was just very recently issued by AMLA in this regard, for example, when it comes to enforcement. And in this case, one of the latest consultation papers that was issued in relation to the non-financial sector.
So in a nutshell, there's quite a few changes coming in. I understand that they are gradual, that albeit AMLA is operational, things are going to be coming in stages. Yes. The official kick-off date for us to be aware of would be?
First of all, AMLA has been legally set up, so it's legally established for more than a year now, if I'm not mistaken, since June 2024, so AMLA exists. AMLA has also been growing in terms of its staff complement. If I'm not mistaken, at the moment it has around 100 employees as well, so it's already grown to that size from nothing, from its first employee. In the space of just some months, and board meetings are taking place as well, so both in person and even online. So we are very active in these board meetings, and so we've already attended a number of them personally in Frankfurt, and some of them are taking place online. And AMLA has also set up several working groups. These working groups are responsible for drafting a lot of the regulatory technical standards and the implementing technical standards that are coming out from time to time. So there is a lot of work taking place behind the scenes. We are actually participating in most of the working groups that AMLA has set up. This is very important. It is important for a number of reasons. First of all, we are part of AMLA. So AMLA is an EU authority, but actually we're part of AMLA because we are on the board, and we are also contributing actively to a lot of the work that AMLA is already doing to prepare for going live, I would say, in 2027. So by being involved, we are already becoming more familiar with the future regulatory technical standards and implementing technical standards that we will have to use in a few years' time. And we are also using our experiences that we have learned from all these years in the financial and in the non-financial sector to contribute to AMLA's work. It is also our responsibility to make sure that any standards that are binding, these are binding standards in the end, that are issued by AMLA, are what I like to describe implementable in practice. So it's useless having very nice rules and regulations if they can't be implemented in practice. And therefore we are also using our past experiences, our knowledge, our technical expertise by participating in these working groups very actively and drafting to try as much as possible to ensure that we, when I say we as AMLA, end up with standards that can actually be applied in practice both by authorities like us and also by subject persons on the ground.
And I think it's also rather critical that it's understood that despite being a small jurisdiction compared to others within AMLA, we are having our say and we are making the impact, because what comes out from AMLA needs to be applicable to, as you're saying, everybody, no matter what the size of the jurisdiction, and be realistic for implementation within each country, which is, I believe, quite a challenge.
Correct. I think so. Everyone brings their own perspective to the table, even when we are having discussions at board level at AMLA. Obviously, different countries have different challenges. The fact that we're a small country comes with also quite a few advantages. I would say one of them is that we've been we're very close to operators. So in the sense we're very close. We have a good feel of the challenges that they come across in trying to implement their AML CFT obligations. We have a very good working relationship with all the representative bodies in Malta that represent the private sector. There's a very good level of awareness of AML CFT obligations among both the financial and the non-financial sector. So we also got a lot of feedback along the years from the sectors, from financial and non-financial. And we've also, being a small country, we've also made sure that all operators in Malta are well aware of their obligations, and we know that comes with challenges. So we can use all of that experience at AMLA, both in the working group meetings and any drafting sessions that are taking place amongst working groups, and even at discussions at board level.
So I would think, to conclude, it's a steep learning curve for the FIAU, I'd say for AMLA itself, and eventually even our subject persons, obliged entities will need to be on board to be learning and engaging with what it takes to be up to speed?
It's definitely a steep learning curve. It's a steep learning curve for everyone, for us, for AMLA, for obliged entities, subject persons. There's a huge amount of work taking place behind the scenes. A lot of people from the FIAU are involved in these working group meetings, and I'm truly grateful for all the work that they do, because this goes above the normal day-to-day work that we in any case have to make sure that keeps taking place. And it is, I would say, a bit of an evolving scene as well. So this is new to many of us. In many ways, so we're all learning, we will continue to learn, and I think from time to time we will take stock of what has been achieved so far, what could be done better, and then implement those lessons learned as time goes by. I think there are many positives as well, so I would say there are a lot of positives. So while AMLA and the package came about as a result of a number of instances of AML failures across the EU that were very worrying. I think there are several advantages to this current framework. The fact that you have a single rule book should create more harmonization across the field. The fact that there should be also an increased harmonization and consistency in the supervisory approaches, because it's so fine to have rules and the same rules, but then how are they going to be actually monitored in practice? And we know that there are very varying degrees of the way supervisors carry out their work. Some are more intrusive, some are less intrusive, some are very desk-based, some are more on-site. So there are really huge differences in the ways that supervisory authorities are approaching their activities, and we have operators operating in different countries as well. So they have to get used to dealing with different supervisors, different approaches. So for a subject person, especially a subject person operating across different member states, over time they should be seeing a noticeable difference. So I think there are several positives, and I can mention more examples. For example, there's a number of projects to harmonize the reporting formats. So at the moment, if you're an operator and you're operating in Malta and in 3 other member states, and you have to submit suspicious reports to the FIAU depending on your customer or on what license you're using, at the moment you will have the different STR format depending
for each one.
On which.
So if you're reporting to three FIUs, for the same case, for example, each STR has to come out different.
Correct. And if you're using one system internally, then you need to see that from that system you extract different reports depending on which FIU in which country you're going to be submitting a report.
And this will be a thing of the past.
So hopefully yes, and there's going to be definitely more harmonization, in the sense that there's a project going on at the moment to identify, let's call it a common reporting format.
Okay.
That's just one example. Okay. So, and I can give many other examples.
So, as always, there's a lot of work to be done, and eventually the benefits will be reaped later down the line, and as we get more used to being part of the system.